of the polar opposite of very good. What in the hell is Chicago doing? I mean, honestly, at this point, it's it's confusing to see what Chicago's doing here because, quite frankly, with all the controversy around them and all the accusations, and it's not looking good to be a Blackhawks fan right now.
No, it's one of those situations where they wanna rebuild again, right? And I say again because some of the star players that they had when they initially did a rebuild, right, like a Jonathan Toews, a Patrick Kane, these guys were there when they did the rebuild. Obviously, it worked. They got 3 championships.
Yep.
3 championships and whatnot. Now they're coming towards the tail end of their career, and let's face it, if you look at their roster, it's a rebuild roster. It almost it almost looks like the Seattle Kraken's draft pick out of the teams when they were just building a team. Period.
Yep.
So it's difficult to see this because you have a Taves and a Kane at the end of their careers, basically, and now you're telling them, hey, we're pretty much rebuilding. We hope you can stick around. We can't guarantee anything. You may not have a good team. You may have a solid team. That's about the best we can do at this moment. But, where do you go? You're a Chicago's fan. You're used to winning. You've had a really good team. Yeah, the past, I think, 2 seasons, they've struggled mightily with the injuries that Taves has had. But outside of that, Kane has been producing, and they weren't horrific. They were bad in record, but they weren't. You could always sit down and watch a Blackhawks game and still say, okay, cool, they're contending. But with the team they have now, it's one of those like, hey, these are the guys left over. Do you want them? Okay, take them. No offense.
I mean, it is
to those guys.
The most baffling move out of all of this was to me, right? You move Alex DeBrincat, young in his 20s, right? You move him before Patrick Kane or Taves? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Because Alex DeBrincat's the guy you want around during the rebuild, so there's some promise on the back end, so you can kind of hit and still be relatively competitive. Instead, they get rid of their youngest goal scorer, who's had two 40-goal seasons. I mean, like, if I'm a Blackhawks fan, I'm like, what are we doing here? And even their draft, some of the people they drafted this past year was kind of like, that was kind of a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
Like, Patrick Kane is 33. Jonathan Toews is 34. Both making $10.5 a year. Kane is the only one I could justify makes that salary worth it. The only one. Taves has seen a downward trend. I think he'd probably be a $3 to maybe a $4 million center in today's market. I don't think he's anywhere near that 10.5 in cap production. But you have Tyler Johnson, you have Anthony Seo, you have Max Domi. To me, this roster looks like a bunch of cast-offs from other teams that were okay to average players. Yeah. On defense, the defense looks really rough. Really rough. You got Seth Jones, who I think is a little overrated at 9.5. McCabe's an okay player, in my opinion. Stillman, okay. Vlasic, young. And then you got Caleb Jones, who's currently an RFA, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, they still need to pick up another defenseman.
Yeah.
What are you going to pick up? You know what I mean? Who'd want to really play for you? Who's going to be a difference maker? You got nothing right now.
You do have nothing. And then the goaltending situation gets worse. It's you have Peter Mrazek, who can't stay healthy and has been vastly overrated. And then you have Alex Stalock, who's he's an okay backup, but there's nothing here that would make Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews want to stay. And so this is the other question I'll ask before we go into the next subject. Do you believe Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, do you think they both stay in Chicago till the end of the season? Do you think one of them moves? Do you think both of them move? What is your prediction regarding that?
I'd be surprised if both of them stay. I expect both of them to get moved at a certain point. And that's when you start looking at those teams that we discussed earlier with the deep pockets, right? Where can they move? Those contracts are hefty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are 10.5. No team is going to be able to take both of those contracts. So when they get moved, they're going to be moved on an individual basis. It's not going to be as a duo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
Like,
no one has 21 million in cap
I mean, unless
space,
they're going to
Dave, right?
Arizona to carry the whole team by themselves.
Let's go.
You know,
Dude, in front of 5,000 fans. Are you excited?
right? Or go to Anaheim. Anaheim has that in loads, right? So those are the two options. Let's go to Anaheim or let's go to Arizona where they're completely rebuilding because they have nobody.
They don't
right?
even have a stadium. Like, fucking great.
You know what I mean? Like, unless they're going to something like that, like, they're going to have to be split up. You know, there's been a lot of talks, a lot of people. Obviously, I'm in New York. I hear a lot of things. A lot of people have been talking about Patrick Kane going to the Rangers. I don't see it. I don't think we have the pocket for that right now or anything like that. And because he's been the most consistent point producer out of the two, right? He's gonna validate that 10.5. So who are you gonna give up? That's gonna make them say, "Oh, yeah, we'll take that." Like, I could see the Rangers only taking Patrick Kane if they give up like maybe a Kaku and like 2 draft picks for the next 3 seasons.
I mean, listen, after that terrible trade for DeBrincat, like maybe the Rangers, all they need to do is offer like a ham sandwich and a fucking 7th round pick, and they can get him. But yeah, no, it makes sense. I don't think the cap makes sense necessarily in New York as well. I don't know if you want to sink. I do think Patrick Kane would be nasty. Like, the only thing is if like Chicago retains some of his salary, and I think that's what they're going to have to do in some of these deals is retain some of the salary.
100%.
Because this is literally the last year of the deal. It's the only way I see it works. But yeah, it's a pretty sad state to be a Chicago Blackhawks fan right now.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago retaining, I'd say that on the Patrick Kane, they're going to end up retaining $2 million. And for Jonathan Toews, I will call out that they're going to retain at least $4 million to $5 million because, again, like you said, his numbers don't justify even close to what he's getting paid. He's a $4 to $5 million player at this point in his career. Especially with the injuries and everything coming back, right? We got to see if he's going to produce. We don't know, and it's one of those situations like, where do we go? Like he's not going to be a first line center. Wherever he goes, he's going to be a third liner, and maybe a second line fill-in. That's it. It's just not there right now.
No, it's just not. And it should be very interesting to see how these things go, quite frankly.